They say revenge is a dish best served cold. But nobody tells you that it tastes like ash in your mouth when the man you're destroying is the father of your unborn child. My finger hovered over the keyboard, one click away from transferring $847 million out of Kai Donovan's accounts. The same accounts I'd created. The same fortune I'd built for him over 7 years while he barely looked at me. 3 hours ago, I'd hidden in a supply closet and heard him call our night together, the most beautiful night of my entire existence, a mistake that could cost me everything. He told his Luna advisor I was a liability he needed to eliminate from the inner circle. So I was about to eliminate him first. I clicked. The screen flashed, transfer complete. I took his money. I took his heir. And for 5 years, I made him pay for calling me a mistake. This is the story of how a billionaire alpha called me a liability, so I disappeared with his fortune and his future. And when we finally met again, he learned that the woman he discarded had become the one thing he could never control, his equal. Welcome back to Rubiana Alpha Romance Tales. These stories take hours to craft, and if you stay until the end, I think you'll see why. Now, let me tell you about Lila and Kai, where the mistake became the mastermind. Act 1. The Betrayal. 7 years. That's how long I'd been in love with a man who didn't know I existed beyond my ability to make him richer. I graduated from Wharton with honors and $200,000 in student debt, desperate for any position that would let me prove myself. When Kai Donovan's Vanguard Lux Corporation offered me the role of Chief Financial Strategist, I thought I'd won the lottery. Fresh out of business school, no experience, and he was trusting me with his billion-dollar empire? It felt like fate. What I didn't understand then was that Kai Donovan didn't believe in fate. He believed in data, strategy, and calculated risk. He'd looked at my academic record, seen my thesis on offshore asset protection, and decided I was useful. That's all I ever was to him. Useful. I was also the only beta wolf in his executive leadership team. In the supernatural world, that made me lesser, weaker, unworthy of real power. The other executives were all alphas, strong, dominant, born into privilege and pack politics. I'd clawed my way up from nothing, and every day I had to prove I deserved to breathe the same air as them. But I had something they didn't. I had genius. Within my first year, I created what I called the Ghost Accounts, a network of emergency financial reserves hidden across 7 countries, 23 different offshore banks, completely invisible to auditors and regulators. Legal, brilliant, and absolutely essential for a company operating at Vanguard Lux's scale. These accounts held hundreds of millions in liquid assets that could be moved instantly in case of crisis, hostile takeover, or government investigation. Only 2 people knew they existed, me and Kai. He trusted me with the passwords to accounts worth more than most countries' GDP. That trust should have felt like intimacy. Instead, it felt like I was a very expensive, very reliable safe. In 5 years, I tripled Vanguard Lux's valuation. I negotiated deals that other strategists said were impossible. I saved Kai's company from 3 different financial disasters that would have bankrupted lesser corporations. And every night, I went home alone to my small apartment and pretended I didn't love him. Kai Donovan was 34 years old and worth $4.2 billion. They called him the Iron Wolf, ruthless in business, cold in personal dealings, absolutely untouchable by emotion or weakness. His father had been assassinated by a rival pack when Kai was only 19, leaving him a dying company and enemies on all sides. Most people expected him to fail within a year. Instead, he built an empire. He transformed his father's struggling manufacturing business into a global conglomerate that touched everything from real estate to technology to pharmaceutical research. He was brilliant, focused, and completely alone. I'd asked him once, during one of our late nights in the office, if he ever wanted to settle down, get married, start a family. He looked at me with those golden alpha eyes and said, "Relationships are weakness, Lila. Love is a liability." My father loved my mother so much that when she died, he stopped thinking clearly. That weakness got him killed. I won't make the same mistake. I should have listened to that warning. I didn't. Instead, I fell deeper in love with him every single day. Late nights when it was just the two of us in the office, reviewing contracts and financial projections. The way he drank his whiskey, always 2 ice cubes, never 3. The small smile he got when a particularly complex deal came together perfectly. The rare moments when he'd look up from his work and actually see me, not just his chief financial strategist, but me. I picked up his Tom Ford suits from the dry cleaner when he forgot. He remembered I took my coffee with oat milk because I was lactose intolerant. Our hands would brush during contract signings, and electricity would spark between us that we both immediately ignored. He trusted me with passwords worth billions. I trusted him with my entire heart. And I knew it was hopeless. Because there was Nova Hale. Nova was everything I wasn't. Elegant Luna advisor, old money, alpha bloodline, pack royalty. She'd known Kai since they were children. Their families had expected them to mate since before either of them could walk. She was sophisticated, beautiful, and she moved through Kai's world like she owned it. She was never cruel to me. That would have been easier. Instead, she was polite, professional, confident in her position. When she looked at me, I could see the calculation in her eyes. This one isn't a threat. She's just the help. And she was right. I was the help. The brilliant help, the indispensable help, but still just an employee who happened to be hopelessly in love with her boss. 7 years of loving a man who saw me as a very talented asset. 7 years of pretending that was enough. And then Zane Croft tried to destroy everything. Croft was a rival alpha, old enemy of Kai's father, had been waiting years for an opportunity to take down the Donovan empire. He launched a hostile takeover that was surgical in its precision. He'd been buying up Vanguard Lux stock for months through shell companies, building a position that gave him enough leverage to force a board vote. He had the financing, the legal team, and the momentum. Kai was going to lose everything. I worked 72 hours straight, surviving on coffee and pure adrenaline. I barely slept, barely ate, just consumed financial documents and legal precedents and corporate bylaws until my eyes burned and my hands shook. The rest of the executive team had given up. Even Kai's lawyers were telling him to negotiate a settlement, accept defeat, salvage what he could. But I found it. An obscure legal loophole buried in corporate merger law from the 1980s, combined with some creative interpretation of international banking regulations. It was brilliant, dangerous, and completely legal. I used the ghost accounts to buy controlling shares in Zane Croft's own company. Not in Vanguard Lux. In Croft Industries. I turned his own strategy against him, purchasing enough of his company's stock to force him into a defensive position. Suddenly, Croft wasn't attacking Kai's empire. He was desperately trying to defend his own. The board vote happened on a Thursday afternoon. Croft walked in confident, ready to claim his victory. He walked out humiliated, having barely saved his own company by withdrawing his takeover attempt. Kai won. And I'd given him that victory. That night, the office was empty. Just the two of us in the boardroom at 2 a.m, a bottle of champagne on the conference table that someone had left for celebration. Kai was staring at the financial reports I'd prepared, the documentation of exactly how I'd outmaneuvered Croft. When he finally looked up at me, there was something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Wonder. You saved everything, he said quietly. You saved me. I should have made a joke. Should have deflected, stayed professional, maintained the careful distance we'd preserved for 7 years. Instead, I just looked at him and felt 7 years of love overflow every boundary I'd built. Of course I did, I said. I always will. He stood up, walked around the conference table, and for the first time in 7 years, he looked at me not as his chief financial strategist, but as a woman. His hand came up to cut my face, thumb brushing across my cheek with a tenderness that made my breath catch. How did I never see you before? He whispered. And then he kissed me. 7 years of longing exploded between us. His hands in my hair, my fingers clutching at his shirt, both of us desperate and hungry and finally touching each other the way I'd dreamed about for so long. "You're extraordinary," he breathed against my lips. "I've been blind. I've loved you since the first day," I confessed, the words spilling out before I could stop them. He pulled back just enough to look at me, his golden eyes blazing with something that looked almost like fear. "Stay with me," he said urgently. "Not just tonight. Stay." We made love on the boardroom couch, surrounded by the financial reports that had saved his empire. It was desperate and tender and absolutely perfect. He touched me like I was precious, like I mattered, like I was something more than useful. We fell asleep tangled together, his arms around me, his heartbeat steady against my cheek. And I believed everything had changed forever. I was wrong. I woke up alone, cold leather against my bare skin where Kai's warmth should have been. For a moment, I thought maybe he'd just gotten up, maybe he was in the bathroom or getting coffee. Then I saw my phone and the text message waiting for me. "Had early meeting. Take the day off." K. No warmth. No acknowledgement of what we'd shared. Just a professional dismissal, like I'd worked late on a project and deserved a break. I got dressed in the empty boardroom, my hands shaking, telling myself I was overreacting. He probably did have an early meeting. He was busy. He'd talk to me later. Explain. Acknowledge what had happened between us. I went home, confused but hopeful. Took a shower, changed clothes, tried to process the whiplash of going from the most beautiful night of my life to waking up alone with a cold text message. The next day, I returned to work expecting something. An acknowledgement. A private conversation. Maybe even just a look that said last night meant something to me. Instead, Kai treated me exactly the same as he always had. Professional. Distant. Cold. "Good morning, Lila. Did you get the Morrison contracts reviewed?" "Yes, Mr. Donovan. They're on your desk." "Excellent. Also, we need to restructure the European accounts. Can you have that analysis ready by Thursday?" Business as usual. Like the most important night of my life had never happened. I told myself he was being professional. We were at work. He couldn't exactly pull me into his office and confess his feelings in front of the entire executive team. I just needed to be patient. Give him time to figure out how to navigate this new dynamic between us. But 3 days passed, and nothing changed. He was polite, professional, and completely unreachable. Every time I tried to catch his eye, he was already looking away. Every time I lingered after a meeting, hoping for a private word, he was immediately on to the next task. It was like I'd imagined the entire thing. On the third day, I arrived at the office at 6:30 in the morning to prepare contracts for a merger Kai was negotiating. I needed supplies from the storage closet on the floor below his office, the small, cramped room where we kept extra legal files and office equipment. I was digging through a box of folders when I heard voices from above. Kai's office was directly overhead, and apparently the building's ventilation system carried sound better than anyone realized. I should have announced myself. Should have made noise so they knew someone was below. Instead, I froze because the voices were talking about me. The pack elders are asking questions about Lila Sterling. That was Nova Hale, her voice carrying that polished, finishing school accent. She's not alpha bloodline. Why does she have access to everything? Because she's brilliant, Kai said, and my heart lifted for just a moment. Because I trust her. You slept with her. The silence that followed was damning. Long enough for me to count my own heartbeats. Long enough for hope to start dying in my chest. That was a mistake, Kai said finally, and the words hit me like a physical blow. A moment of weakness that could cost me everything if the council finds out. You know the laws, alphas who made outside bloodlines lose pack standing. I slumped to the floor of the closet, hand pressed over my mouth to muffle any sound. So, what are you going to do about her? Nova asked. What I have to. Lila is a liability I need to eliminate from the inner circle. I'll phase her out slowly, restructure her role, limit her access. She's too competent to fire outright without raising suspicion, but I can't have this complication. She loves you, Nova said quietly. I've seen how she looks at you. That's exactly why she has to go. Before this becomes something I can't control. I sat in that supply closet for an hour after they left, silent tears streaming down my face, hand still pressed over my mouth like I could somehow hold in the sound of my heart breaking. A mistake. A moment of weakness. A liability to eliminate. 7 years of love, reduced to a complication he needed to control. When I finally emerged, my eyes were red but my resolve was iron. If I was a liability, I'd become his worst nightmare. If he wanted to eliminate me, I'd eliminate him first. Have you ever heard something that shattered your entire world in 30 seconds? Something that took everything you believed and turned it into a lie? That's what happened to me in that supply closet. And what I did next would change both our lives forever. 2 weeks later, I was in a board meeting when the nausea hit. I excused myself, made it to the bathroom, and threw up everything I'd eaten for breakfast. I knew before I took the test. I'd been too exhausted, too emotional, too aware of my own body to miss the signs. That night, I bought 3 pregnancy tests from 3 different pharmacies. All positive. The next morning, I saw a doctor who confirmed what I already knew. 6 weeks pregnant. Single child. Conceived the night Kai and I had been together. I also did something the doctor didn't recommend: genetic testing. I needed to know if the child was alpha bloodline, if they'd inherited Kai's supernatural abilities. The results came back within days. Alpha markers. Extremely powerful. This wasn't just Kai's child, this was a potential heir to one of the strongest bloodlines in the pack hierarchy. I sat in my apartment, staring at the test results and tried to figure out what to do. Tell Kai? He'd already called our night together a mistake. What would he call a child he didn't want? At best, I'd be labeled a gold digger, someone who'd trapped him with a pregnancy. At worst, he'd take the child and cut me out completely, using his wealth and pack connections to make me irrelevant. Keep quiet? He'd find out eventually. And then I'd face a custody battle I couldn't possibly win. He had billions. I had student debt and a salary that, while generous, was nothing compared to his resources. Disappear? I'd lose my career, my life, everything I'd built over 7 years. I'd be running forever, always looking over my shoulder, always afraid he'd find us. Or option 4. The option that crystallized in my mind like ice. Take everything from him first. I had access to the ghost accounts. I'd created them. I knew every password, every security protocol, every layer of protection. And I was the only one who understood how they really worked. I opened my laptop and began researching. How to disappear completely. How to create a new identity. How to transfer massive amounts of money without triggering immediate alarms. And then, while accessing the ghost accounts to plan my transfers, I found something that made my blood run cold. A hidden folder on the company server. Not in the main file structure, but buried in archived backups where only someone with my level of access would even know to look. The folder was labeled Sterling Transition Plan. My name. My transition. I opened it with trembling hands. Before we continue with what I discovered in that file, a discovery that would justify everything I was about to do, I want to hear from you. Have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted completely? Someone who made you feel like you meant nothing? Drop a comment and let me know. And if you're invested in my revenge, hit that like button. Trust me, what happens next is wild. Act 2, The Revenge. The Sterling Transition Plan was laid out with the kind of meticulous detail that Kai brought to every business strategy. 18 months. That's how long he'd planned to systematically erase me from existence. Phase 1, months 1 through 3, restructure my role to senior advisor. On paper, it would look like a lateral move, maybe even a promotion. In reality, it stripped away all my actual power. No direct reports. No authority to execute strategies. No access to critical financial systems. I'd become a consultant to my own work, offering suggestions that could be ignored. Phase 2, months 4 through 6. Transfer all my strategies to Kai's name in company documentation. The ghost accounts? Kai's innovation. The Croft victory? Kai's strategic genius. 7 years of financial architecture that had built his empire, all attributed to him, with perhaps a footnote mentioning I'd assisted with implementation. Phase 3, months 7 through 9. Hire a replacement. His name was already chosen: Brock Slade, male alpha with impeccable bloodline credentials and an MBA from Stanford. The job posting was drafted, the salary negotiated. They'd already made him an offer. Phase 4, months 10 through 12. Credit Brock with my past achievements. The transition would be seamless, they'd written. Brock would be presented to the board and investors as the mastermind behind Vanguard Lux's success. The Croft strategy, my masterpiece, the thing I'd worked 72 hours straight to create, would become Brock's signature achievement. His alpha credentials would justify the promotion. Phase 5, months 13 through 15. Create impossible performance metrics I couldn't meet. Revenue targets that required access I no longer had. Strategic objectives that contradicted each other. Deadlines designed to ensure failure. They'd document everything meticulously, building a case that I was no longer performing at the level required. Phase 6, months 16 through 18. Force my resignation for cause. No severance package. No references. No acknowledgement of 7 years of service. Just a quiet exit and an ironclad non-compete agreement that would prevent me from working in finance for 5 years. The final goal was stated clearly in the document's conclusion: complete erasure of L. Sterling's digital footprint from all major deals. Rewrite company history to reflect appropriate alpha leadership at all strategic decision points. Erase me. Like I'd never existed. I scrolled through the attached email chains with hands that had gone numb. The first was between Kai and an executive headhunter, dated 2 days after our night together. Need alpha replacement for current CFO. Bloodline essential. Discretion critical. Budget unlimited. Candidate must be able to assume credit for existing financial architecture without raising questions. Please prioritize candidates with minimal ethical concerns regarding intellectual property claims. The second was between Kai and his corporate lawyer. Review non-compete and NDA agreements for senior staff termination without cause. Need ironclad protection against future legal action or disclosure of proprietary strategies. Particular focus on restricting employment in finance sector for maximum allowable period. Also need documentation structure that would support for-cause termination if employee contests separation terms. The third was the most damning. Between Kai and Brock Slade himself. Position opens in 6 weeks. Transition will be seamless. We'll brief you on all existing strategies and credit you with their creation. The Croft victory strategy in particular will be your signature achievement going forward. Your alpha credentials will justify the promotion to the board. Current strategist is being phased out due to compatibility issues with pack hierarchy. Discretion appreciated. I sat in my empty office at 2 in the morning, the glow of my computer screen the only light, staring at the evidence of my own systematic erasure. He wasn't just pushing me out. He was stealing my legacy. 7 years of brilliance, about to be attributed to a man who'd been hired specifically to replace me. My name would be scrubbed from company history. The strategies that had made Kai a billionaire would become someone else's genius. I'd be forgotten. An assistant who'd helped, maybe, but wasn't essential. The Croft strategy, the thing I was most proud of, the financial architecture that had saved his entire empire, would be credited to someone who hadn't even been there. Who hadn't worked 72 hours straight, who hadn't found the loophole, who hadn't risked everything on a strategy so brilliant it bordered on madness. Brock Slade would take my masterpiece and claim it as his own. And Kai would let him. He called our night a mistake. But this was calculated. Systematic. Evil. He was going to erase me like I'd never existed. So I decided to erase him instead. I printed everything, every email, every timeline, every piece of evidence. Then I encrypted copies on 3 separate drives and hid them in different locations. One in a safety deposit box. One mailed to a post office box I'd rented under a fake name. One uploaded to a secure cloud server with access codes only I knew. Then I began planning the perfect crime. My advantages were significant. I'd created the ghost accounts. Not just managed them, created them from nothing. I knew every security protocol, every transfer limit, every layer of encryption. I knew which banks asked questions and which didn't. I knew how to move money invisibly, how to fragment transactions so they'd slip under automated detection thresholds. Kai had access to the accounts, technically, but he never monitored them. Why would he? He trusted me completely. That was my opening. $847 million, spread across 23 offshore accounts in 7 countries. Legally classified as emergency reserve funds with minimal oversight. No auditors reviewed them because managing them discreetly was literally part of my job description. I had 2 weeks before Kai's plan moved to phase 2. 2 weeks before they started rewriting history. 2 weeks to disappear. The first week was identity creation. I researched everything about disappearing completely. Not just running, truly vanishing. I learned about biometric databases, facial recognition systems, digital footprints that could track you across continents. I learned which countries had corrupt banking systems that didn't ask questions, which jurisdictions had privacy laws strong enough to resist even federal investigations. I created Mira Chen. Half Chinese, half American, completely fictional. I built her an employment history going back 8 years, junior analyst positions at small firms that had since gone out of business, references to dead companies whose records were conveniently destroyed in office fires or bankruptcy proceedings. I fabricated LinkedIn profiles, professional certifications, even a blog about investment strategies that I backdated for 3 years. I opened bank accounts in the Cayman Islands under Mira's name. Secured an apartment rental remotely, paying 6 months in advance with a wire transfer from one of my new accounts. I purchased furniture, established utility accounts, created the digital infrastructure of a life that had supposedly existed for years, but had actually sprung into being over 7 days of obsessive work. The second week was execution. I moved the money in small increments, 30 to 50 million at a time, spread across different days and different accounts. Each transfer was routed through multiple intermediary banks, bouncing between jurisdictions until the origin point was impossible to trace. Luxembourg to Singapore to the Caymans to Switzerland and back again, washing clean with each jump. But I didn't just take the money. I framed Kai for taking it himself. I created a false digital trail suggesting he'd authorized the transfers personally. I had his access codes, he'd given them to me himself years ago. I used them to create transaction records that would look, to any investigator, like Kai had been systematically moving company funds to secret personal accounts. I planted evidence of gambling debts in his personal files, forged documents showing private investments in ventures that had spectacularly failed. Made it look like Kai Donovan, brilliant alpha CEO, had been embezzling from his own company to cover personal losses. It was elegant, cruel, and absolutely devastating. On Thursday night, I booked a one-way flight to Grand Cayman, departing Saturday at 11:47 p.m. I packed a single suitcase with essentials, clothes, documents, the pregnancy test results I'd hidden in a locked box. Everything else I left behind. I didn't break my apartment lease. That would raise questions. Instead, I left it intact, suggesting I'd be coming back eventually. I left my car in airport long-term parking. Left my work laptop on my desk with routine files open, as if I'd been called away suddenly and planned to return. The final touch was the resignation letter, programmed to send automatically on Sunday morning at 9 a.m., after I was already gone and impossible to trace. I wrote it Friday night, my hands steady despite the baby growing inside me. Dear Kai, effective immediately, I resign from my position as Chief Financial Strategist at Vanguard Lux Corporation. After 7 years of dedicated service, I've decided to pursue opportunities that value both my professional contributions and my personal dignity. You once told me I was extraordinary. I'm about to prove you right. The ghost accounts are empty. The money is gone. And so am I. Consider this payment for calling me a mistake. Lila Sterling. P.S. The child you don't know about won't bear your name. Some legacies die with the men too cowardly to claim them. Saturday night, I boarded the flight at exactly 11:47 p.m. The plane was half empty, mostly business travelers and a few tourists. I took my window seat and watched Seattle disappear beneath the clouds, the city lights growing smaller and smaller until they were just pinpricks in the darkness. My hand rested on my still flat stomach, feeling the secret growing there. I'm going to build you a kingdom, baby, I whispered. And your father will never even know you exist. Sunday morning at 9:03 a.m., Kai received my resignation letter. I know this because later, much later, Finn told me about that moment. How Kai had been in his home office, reviewing quarterly reports, when the email arrived. How he'd read it once, confused. Read it again, alarmed. The ghost accounts are empty. He called my phone immediately. Disconnected. He'd tried my personal email. Bounced back. He'd called the office, demanding to know if I'd come in. Nobody had seen me since Friday afternoon. Then he'd rushed to the office himself, logged into the ghost accounts with hands that were starting to shake. $847 million, $0. Every single account. Empty. He'd stared at that screen for 10 minutes, Finn said, not moving, not breathing, just staring at the zeros where his empire's emergency reserve should have been. By Sunday afternoon, Kai had called an emergency board meeting. They'd discovered the digital trail suggesting he'd authorized the transfers himself. His signatures, perfectly forged. His access codes. His computer's IP address associated with the transaction logs. The board turned on him within hours. Did you embezzle from your own company? They'd brought in forensic accountants, corporate lawyers, crisis management teams. Federal investigators arrived Tuesday morning. Kai's assets were frozen pending investigation. The media descended like vultures. Billionaire Alpha CEO under investigation for fraud was the headline on every financial news site. Kai went in my apartment Tuesday afternoon. Found it cleared out, lease abandoned, no forwarding address. He hired private investigators, the best money could buy. But the trail went cold at the airport. Security footage showed me boarding a flight, but Mira Chen's passport was too clean, too perfect. My car was found in long-term parking, exactly where I'd left it as misdirection. I had no family to question. My parents were dead. I was an only child. The few friends I'd maintained during 7 years of working 80-hour weeks knew nothing about my personal life. I'd been invisible even before I disappeared. And then Kai reread my letter for the 100th time and saw the postscript. The detail he'd missed in his initial panic about the money. The child you don't know about won't bear your name. Child. She was pregnant. With his child. He did the math. 6 weeks when she left meant conception around the night they'd been together. The only night they'd been together. He had a child somewhere in the world. And he'd never meet them. The first year was hell for Kai Donovan. The federal investigation dragged on for months. The company hemorrhaged money without my strategic genius. I'd been handling everything, and whoever they brought in to replace me couldn't match my work. The stock price dropped 62%. Investors fled. Credit lines dried up. Rival alphas sensed weakness. Territorial challenges began, other packs pushing into Vanguard Lux territories, testing Kai's authority. Zanecroft launched new attacks on vulnerable business sectors, trying to finish what he'd started years ago. Kai was forced to sell assets just to stay afloat. His personal fortune, built over 15 years, depleted defending the company and paying legal fees. The federal investigation eventually cleared him, They couldn't prove he'd taken the money because he hadn't, but the damage was done. His reputation was destroyed. Nobody trusted him anymore. And he was obsessed with finding me. He hired 12 different private investigators over 5 years. Spent millions trying to track me down. Every lead dead-ended. Every investigator came back empty-handed. Lila Sterling had vanished as completely as if she'd never existed. Finn watched his boss destroy himself. Kai lost 30 pounds. Stopped sleeping more than 3 hours a night. Worked himself to exhaustion, then worked more. Became a ghost haunting his own empire, driven by guilt and obsession and the knowledge that somewhere, he had a child he'd never meet. "Boss, you need to let her go," Finn said one night, finding Kai in his office at 3 a.m., surrounded by investigator reports. "I can't," Kai said, and his voice was broken in a way Finn had never heard before. "I destroyed the only person who ever loved me. And she's raising my child thinking I called them both mistakes. 5 years can rebuild a life. Or destroy one." For Kai, it was the latter. For me, it was transformation. Grand Cayman became my sanctuary. I gave birth to Asher in a private hospital, alone except for the medical staff, holding my son and crying because he had his father's golden eyes. The same eyes I'd fallen in love with 7 years ago. The same eyes that had looked at me with wonder before looking through me with indifference. I named him Asher because it meant happy and blessed, and I wanted him to be both things his father, and I had never quite managed. Chen became his legal last name, tying him to the identity I'd built. Those first months were hard. Pregnancy had been easier than single motherhood. But I had money, more money than I could spend in 3 lifetimes, and I used it to build the life I'd dreamed about. The life I'd wanted with Kai, adapted for just the two of us. By the time Asher was 2, I'd turned the $847 million into over $1 billion through careful investments. By the time he was 5, I'd built Chen Capital Ventures into one of the most exclusive boutique investment firms in the world. I managed portfolios for billionaires across 3 continents. Sheiks, tech CEOs, old money families who'd been wealthy for generations, and new money entrepreneurs who'd built empires overnight. They all came to me because I had something rare in the finance world, a perfect track record. Every investment I recommended succeeded. Every strategy one designed worked. They called me the Ice Queen of Cayman Finance. Ruthless. Brilliant. Untouchable. I'd turned 12 failing companies into billion-dollar successes. Governments consulted me on economic policy. Other billionaires begged for appointments, willing to pay 6-figure fees just for an hour of my advice. I was more powerful than Kai Donovan had ever been. I'd built an empire without his name, without his connections, without anything except the money I'd taken and the genius he'd tried to steal. But late at night, when Asher was asleep and the ocean was quiet outside my villa windows, I still thought about Kai. Wondered if he ever thought about me. If he regretted what he'd done. If he understood what he'd lost. Asher grew up speaking 3 languages. English from me, Mandarin from his nanny, Spanish from his preschool. He attended the most prestigious international school on the island, where the children of diplomats and billionaires learned together. He was brilliant, precocious, and he had alpha abilities that manifested far earlier than they should have. Enhanced strength at 3 years old. Heightened senses at 4. An instinctive dominance that made other children naturally defer to him. I watched him grow into a tiny version of his father and felt my heart break and heal simultaneously every single day. "Mama, why don't I have a daddy?" he asked one night when he was 4, watching other families at a school event. I knelt down to his level, looking into those golden eyes that were so achingly familiar. "Your daddy wasn't ready to be a father, sweetheart," I said carefully. "But you have me, and I love you enough for 2 parents." He thought about that for a moment, then nodded seriously. "Okay, Mama. You're the best anyway." I held him and cried after he fell asleep that night. He deserved better than this. Better than a father who didn't know he existed. Better than a mother whose love was tangled up with revenge and heartbreak. But this was the life I'd chosen. The life I'd built. And I'd make it enough. 5 years after I disappeared, the Financial Times ran a feature article on Mira Chen and my latest investment success. I'd taken a failing tech startup and turned it into a unicorn worth $3 billion. The article detailed my strategy, analyzing the financial architecture with the kind of technical depth that only industry insiders would appreciate. In Seattle, Finn Carver was reading that same article over breakfast when something made him pause. He reread the strategy section, then read it again. The approach was familiar. Too familiar. The way Mira Chen had restructured the company's debt. The creative use of offshore entities. The timing of the stock buybacks. Even the language used to describe the strategy had a specific rhythm. He'd seen this exact approach before. 5 years ago. In the strategy that had saved Vanguard Lux from Zane Croft's hostile takeover. Finn pulled up old files, comparing the Croft victory strategy with Mira Chen's tech company turnaround. The patterns matched perfectly. It was like reading two pieces written by the same author, the financial equivalent of a literary fingerprint. He grabbed his phone, hands shaking slightly, and called Kai. "Boss," he said. "I think I found her." There was a long silence on the other end. "Then what?" "Lila. I think I found Lila. She's been hiding in plain sight as Mira Chen. She's more successful than ever." "And boss?" Finn paused. "She's going to be at the Geneva Billionaire Summit next week. She's the keynote speaker." Another silence. Longer this time. When Kai spoke, his voice was raw. "Book my flight." The Geneva International Billionaire Summit. 3 days of panels, networking, and deal-making among the global financial elite. The invitation-only event where billion-dollar partnerships formed over champagne and whispered conversations. I was the keynote speaker, addressing 700 of the world's wealthiest individuals on financial ethics in modern markets. The irony wasn't lost on me, a woman who'd stolen $847 million lecturing about ethics. But I'd been invited. My reputation as Mira Chen was impeccable. And I had things to say about how powerful men treated the women who made them successful. Kai was attending to rebuild his reputation. 5 years after the investigation, he was finally emerging from the wreckage I'd left behind. His company had survived, barely. His personal fortune was a fraction of what it had been. But he was still Kai Donovan, still powerful, still fighting. Neither of us knew the other would be there. Fate had decided we'd waited long enough. 5 years of separation. 5 years of transformation. 5 years of revenge and regret. We were about to collide. Okay, beautiful listeners. 5 years have passed. I've transformed from discarded employee to financial powerhouse. Kai has been broken, investigated, humiliated, and obsessed. We're about to come face to face in Geneva, and neither of us is the same person we were. But here's what I want to know from you. Do you think Kai deserves a second chance? Or should I make him suffer more? Comment below, I'm reading every single one. And if you're on Team Lila's revenge, smash that like button right now. Act 3. The Collision. The Geneva Grand Ballroom was everything money could buy. Crystal chandeliers the size of cars. Marble floors polished to mirror perfection. 700 of the world's wealthiest individuals seated in chairs that probably cost more than most people's cars. This was power concentrated in one room, and I was about to address all of it. Backstage, I adjusted my gray Armani suit, checked my hair in the mirror. Sleek bun, diamond earrings that had cost me $50,000, makeup applied with the precision of armor. I looked nothing like the woman who'd fled Seattle 5 years ago. That woman had been broken, desperate, running. This woman was Mira Chen, billionaire investor, financial genius, untouchable. "Miss Chen, you're on in 2 minutes," the stage manager said. I took a breath, centered myself. The speech was loaded in my mind, every word memorized. I was going to talk about corporate integrity and what happens when powerful men abuse the trust of those who serve them. I was going to talk about stolen legacies and erased contributions. And I was going to do it without ever mentioning Kai Donovan's name. Please welcome our keynote speaker, Mira Chen. The applause was polite but genuine as I walked onto the stage. The lights were bright enough that I couldn't see individual faces in the audience, just a sea of expensive suits and jewelry. Good. I didn't need to see them. I just needed them to hear me. Today I want to talk about corporate integrity. I began, my voice carrying clearly through the sound system. And what happens when powerful men abuse the trust of those who serve them? The doors at the back of the ballroom opened. Even from the stage, even with the lights in my eyes, I knew who it was. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was the way the energy in the room shifted. Maybe it was just fate finally catching up with both of us. Kai Donovan entered late, trying to be discreet, his dark suit immaculate, his posture still carrying that alpha authority I remembered. He was thinner than he'd been 5 years ago. Harder. There were lines on his face that hadn't been there before. Our eyes locked across 200 people and 5 years of separation. I froze mid-sentence, my hand gripping the podium hard enough that my knuckles went white. My prepared speech vanished from my mind. All I could see was him, standing frozen in the aisle like he'd been struck by lightning. Recognition dawned across his face. Shock. Wonder. Devastation. All of it playing out in those golden eyes I'd once loved so desperately. 10 seconds of silence. An eternity on stage. The audience started murmuring, turning to see what had caught their keynote speaker's attention. I found my voice. Found my armor. Found the cold fury that had sustained me through 5 years of exile. As I was saying, I continued, my eyes never leaving Kai's face. Some mistakes have long-term consequences. I said the word mistakes like it was a weapon. Like it was a blade designed specifically to cut him. And I watched it land, watched him flinch like I'd physically struck him. He couldn't look away. Neither could I. The audience probably thought we were having some kind of dramatic moment for effect. They had no idea they were witnessing 5 years of rage and heartbreak condensed into a single look. I continued my speech, but every word felt aimed at him. Corporate betrayal. Stolen legacies. Men who underestimate women. The brilliant employees whose work gets attributed to others. The people who build empires for powerful men and get erased from history. I never said his name. I didn't have to. He knew. God, he knew. The speech became an indictment, delivered with perfect professional composure while my heart tried to beat its way out of my chest. I talked about the cost of betrayal, about revenge, about women who refuse to be victims. And I watched Kai standing in that aisle, unable to move, unable to breathe, taking every word like a blow. When I finished, the audience gave me a standing ovation. They thought I was talking about abstract corporate ethics. They had no idea I'd just publicly destroyed a man without anyone realizing it except him. I exited stage left, heading immediately for the back exit. I needed to get out of this building, get back to my hotel, get Asher, and leave Geneva before. Lila. His voice stopped me like a command. I stood in the hallway, my back to him, my entire body rigid. I'm sorry, I said without turning around. You must have me confused with someone else. My name is Mira Chen. Don't. His voice was raw, desperate. Please don't do this. 5 years. You disappeared for 5 years. I turned around slowly, keeping my face composed, professional. I learned from the best. You're excellent at making people disappear, Kai. Or did you forget the Sterling transition plan? The blood drained from his face. You knew about. I knew everything I said, and let the words cut. Every email. Every conversation with that headhunter. Every plan to erase me from history. So I erased myself first. The money, he started, was mine, I interrupted. I created those accounts. I filled them with profits from strategies you would have stolen credit for. I took what I earned. You destroyed everything, he said, and there was anguish in his voice. The investigation, the losses, the good. The word came out cold. Flat. Final. You called me a mistake, Kai. I just made sure you'd spend the rest of your life regretting it. His face crumpled. This powerful alpha, this billionaire who'd built an empire, looked like I'd just killed something vital inside him. Is there a child? He asked quietly. The letter said, "That's none of your business anymore." I tried to walk past him. His hand caught my wrist, gentle despite the desperation in his grip. "Please," he said. "Just tell me. Do I have a child?" I looked at his hand on my wrist, then up at his face. At the golden eyes that were so achingly familiar, now filled with something that looked almost like hope. "You made your choice 5 years ago," I said quietly. "Live with it." I pulled away and disappeared into the crowd before he could stop me again. Before I could do something stupid like tell him the truth. Before the armor I'd built could crack and let him see that after 5 years, it still hurt to look at him. The next day, I should have left Geneva. Should have packed Asher up and gotten on the first flight back to Grand Cayman. Instead, I made the mistake of thinking I was safe. Thinking that one encounter was all fate had planned for us. The conference offered childcare services for attendees with children. A supervised program in one of the hotel's conference rooms where kids could play while their parents networked. I'd been using it all week, and Asher loved it. He'd made friends with a smaller boy named Marcus, and they'd been building elaborate block structures together. I should have known better. I was in a morning panel discussion when I felt it. Every alpha in the building felt it, a surge of power so strong it made the lights flicker. Not possible. No child under 12 could generate that kind of command presence. But I knew, even before I ran to the children's room, exactly whose power that was. The scene I walked into was chaos barely contained by confused adults. Derek, a 7-year-old alpha from one of the older pack families, was backed against the wall, trembling. Marcus was crying but unhurt. And Asher, my 5-year-old son, was standing between them like a miniature warrior, his golden eyes still glowing with residual power. "What happened?" I demanded, kneeling beside Asher. "He was being mean," Asher said simply. "He hurt Marcus and said Omegas are weak." I told him to stop. Oh God. He'd used Alpha Command. At 5 years old. In front of dozens of witnesses. "Mama, I didn't mean to be scary," Asher said, his little face worried. "I just wanted him to stop hurting Marcus." "You're not in trouble, baby," I assured him, even as I felt the weight of every adult's eyes on us. "You were very brave." "That child." The voice came from the doorway. Elena Voss, council leader, one of the most powerful political figures in the supernatural world. "Who is that child?" The supervisor checked her clipboard with shaking hands. "Asher Chen. His mother is Mira Chen, one of the conference speakers." Elena's eyes narrowed. "Chen. As in the keynote speaker from yesterday." She moved closer, studying Asher with the kind of attention that made my protective instincts scream. "Those eyes. That power signature. That's Donovan bloodline. Pure alpha lineage." "I don't know what you're talking about," I said, pulling Asher closer. "Don't you?" Elena looked at me with calculation in her eyes. "Mira Chen. Or should I say Lila Sterling?" "Oh yes, I remember you. Kai Donovan's missing CFO. The one who vanished 5 years ago with his company's fortune." Before I could respond, another presence entered the room. I felt him before I saw him, that alpha power I'd been attuned to for 7 years. Kai pushed through the crowd of adults, drawn by the same power surge that had brought everyone else running. His eyes found Asher, and I watched the exact moment recognition hit. The golden eyes. The facial structure. The commanding presence that was impossible to fake. Our son looked exactly like him, just miniaturized, and there was no hiding it. "Mama says staring is rude," Asher said, tilting his head as he looked at Kai. Kai's voice, when he finally managed to speak, was barely above a whisper. "What's your name?" "Asher. I'm 5 3/4. Who are you?" "I'm..." Kai's throat worked as he tried to get the words out. "I'm Kai." Asher studied him with that unsettling intensity he'd inherited from his father. "Mama, why is that man crying?" I scooped Asher into my arms, holding him like a shield between myself and the past. Come on, baby. Time to go. I have a son, Kai said, broken, wondering. We have a son. You have nothing, I said quietly, firmly, and walked past him carrying our child. I could feel his eyes on us all the way out of the room. Could hear the whispers starting behind us. Could sense Elena Voss cataloging every detail for future use. But I kept walking, kept moving, kept my baby safe in my arms. Boss. Finn Carver appeared beside Kai as I disappeared around the corner. Boss, I missed 5 years, Kai said, still staring after us. 5 years of his life. His first words, first steps, first everything. Because I was too much of a coward to fight for her. That night, Kai sat in his hotel suite for 6 hours without moving. Finn found him there at midnight, still in his conference clothes, staring at nothing. We need to talk, Finn said, holding up a flash drive. There's something I should have told you 5 years ago. Kai didn't even look up. Nothing matters anymore. This does. Finn sat down across from him. Boss, what I'm about to tell you. I was sworn to silence under Alpha Command. Zane Croft made sure I couldn't disobey. But I'm breaking that bond now because you need to know the truth. That got Kai's attention. What truth? Finn inserted the flash drive into Kai's laptop and pulled up files that had been encrypted for 5 years. Croft didn't just try to take over your company. He tried to destroy you by targeting your weakness. Lila. The evidence was devastating. Fabricated photos of Lila meeting with Croft's operatives at restaurants, coffee shops, all time-stamped to correspond with major company decisions. Falsified financial records showing $1.2 million transferred from Croft's enterprises to an offshore account in Lila's name. It looked exactly like corporate espionage. This isn't real, Kai said, but his voice was uncertain. No, it's not. But it looked real enough to convince you, didn't it? Finn pulled up a recorded conversation. Listen. Croft's voice came through the speakers. She's a spy, Donovan. I have proof. Turn her into the council or I will. Kai's own voice, 5 years younger. I don't believe you. Then she'll be executed. Council law states that corporate spies are killed. No trial. No appeal. She's dead within a week unless you cooperate. What do you want? Distance yourself. Make her irrelevant. If she's no longer your weakness, I lose interest. Otherwise, I take the evidence to the council tomorrow and you'll watch her die. Kai listened to his own voice agreeing, making promises to phase Lila out slowly. And he understood, 5 years too late, what he'd done. The conversation she overheard, he said slowly. With Nova. Was theater, Finn confirmed. Nova was working with Croft. You needed her to report back that you were handling the Lila problem. Every word was performance. The Sterling transition plan? Also fake. Created for Nova to find. Brock Slade was loyal to you. He would have been a figurehead. The plan was to make Lila appear powerless so Croft would lose interest. You were going to tell her everything once the threat passed. Kai felt like he'd been hit by a truck. I was trying to save her life. In the stupidest way possible, Finn agreed. By making her think you didn't want her. She ran because of me. She took our son because she thought I'd called them both mistakes. Kai's voice broke. Everything I did to protect her drove her away instead. She's thriving, boss. She's more successful than you ever were. She's raised your son to be strong and kind and brilliant. Maybe? Finn hesitated. Maybe it's better this way. Better. Kai looked at him with eyes that held 5 years of anguish. She thinks I'm a monster. My son doesn't know I exist. And I deserve every second of this pain because I chose to protect her without trusting her. I treated her like she was fragile when she was the strongest person I've ever known. So, what are you going to do? Kai looked at the evidence on the screen, at the proof that everything Lila believed about him was wrong. I'm going to tell her the truth. And then I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving I'm worthy of them. Even if it takes another 5 years. Hold up. Let me make sure we're all processing this correctly. Everything I heard, mistake, liability, eliminate from inner circle, Was Kai trying to save my life? The money I stole? Keep listening, because that revelation is coming and it's insane. But first, do you think this changes things? Should I forgive him? Or was his method so toxic that it doesn't matter what his intentions were? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you're feeling all the emotions right now, hit that like button. We're in the home stretch, and it only gets more intense from here. Act 4. The Crisis. Midnight found me at my desk in our hotel suite, reviewing financial documents while Asher slept peacefully in the bedroom. The Geneva skyline glittered outside our 32nd floor windows, and I was trying very hard not to think about the fact that Kai Donovan now knew his son existed. The knock at the door made me freeze. I checked the peephole and saw exactly what I'd been dreading. Kai stood in the hallway with Finn Carver beside him. Both looked grim, determined, and I knew before I opened the door that this conversation was going to change everything. Absolutely not, I said through the door. Please, Kai's voice carried clearly. Just hear me out. It's about Asher's safety. That got my attention. I opened the door but blocked the entrance with my body. You don't get to be concerned about him now. The power he displayed today, Kai said urgently. Every alpha in Geneva felt it. That makes him a target. He's right, Lila, Finn added. The Obsidian Collective hunts children with powerful bloodlines. They'll have marked Asher after today. Fear cut through my anger like ice water. What's the Obsidian Collective? Let me in, Kai said. Please. We need to talk. I looked between them, calculating rapidly. Kai could be lying, manipulating me to get access to our son. But Finn's expression was deadly serious, and he'd always been honest with me during my years at Vanguard Lux. I stepped aside. They entered quickly, and Finn immediately pulled out a tablet with security footage. The Obsidian Collective is an international organization that's been operating in the shadows for 15 years, Kai explained as Finn queued up the video. They kidnap alpha children with strong bloodlines, experiment on them, trying to create enhanced warriors, then sell them to the highest bidders, private armies, criminal organizations, anyone willing to pay. The council hasn't been able to stop them, Finn added. They're too well-funded, too well-connected. And they're very good at identifying targets. He showed me the surveillance footage. Men in expensive suits, photographing Asher during the incident with Derek. License plates traced to shell companies. Companies connected to Obsidian Front organizations. They know about him, Finn said quietly. They have his photo, his power signature, probably his genetic profile by now. A 5-year-old with that level of alpha command? He's exactly what they're looking for. The tablet nearly slipped from my hands. What do we do? We protect him, Kai said. Together. I don't trust you. I know. His golden eyes held mine, and I saw genuine fear there. Fear for our son. But I'm not leaving you two unprotected. So either you let me stay, or I camp outside your door. Your choice. Before I could respond, a small voice came from the bedroom doorway. Mama? What's happening? Asher stood there in his pajamas, rubbing his eyes, looking impossibly small and vulnerable. His gaze landed on Kai and recognition flickered across his face. Is that the crying man from earlier? Kai moved slowly, carefully, like approaching a wild animal that might bolt. He knelt down to Asher's level, making himself smaller, less threatening. Hi, Asher. I'm a friend of your mom's. I'm here to make sure you're safe. From what? From bad people. But don't worry. Kai's voice was steady despite the emotion I could see in his eyes. Nobody's going to hurt you while I'm here. Asher studied him with that unnerving intensity he'd inherited from his father. Promise? I promise. Kai's voice broke slightly on the words. Asher seemed satisfied with this answer. He went back to bed without argument, trusting in a way that made my chest ache. He'd never had a father figure before, and he was already instinctively accepting Kai in that role. I looked at Kai, still kneeling where Asher had left him, and made a decision I hoped I wouldn't regret. You can stay in the sitting room, but if you try anything, I won't. He stood up slowly. Thank you. Finn left to coordinate with additional security. Kai settled into an armchair in the sitting room, positioning himself between the door and the bedrooms. I tried to go back to my documents, but I was too aware of his presence, too unsettled by having him this close after 5 years. Around 3 a.m., I must have dozed off at my desk. What woke me was the sound of glass breaking. No alarms. No warnings. Just the sudden, terrible knowledge that we were under attack. Kai was already moving, his body shifting partially as alpha abilities took over. Claws extended. Fangs lengthened. His eyes blazed gold as 6 armed operatives poured through our door with military precision. "Asher!" I screamed, running for the bedroom. Kai intercepted the first wave in the sitting room. I heard fighting, gunshots with suppressors, the sounds of violence that shouldn't exist in a luxury hotel. I grabbed Asher from his bed and backed into the corner, putting my body between him and the door. 2 operatives made it past Kai. They moved toward us with terrifying efficiency, night vision goggles and weapons that looked designed to incapacitate rather than kill. They wanted Asher alive. One of them grabbed my arm. The other reached for my son. And Asher woke up. He saw strange men with guns. Saw his mother being grabbed. Saw Kai, the man he was already thinking of as daddy, bleeding from a bullet wound, still fighting in the other room. 5 years old. Terrified. Desperate to protect the people he loved. My son erupted with power that shouldn't have been possible. His eyes flashed pure gold, not just the color, but actual light blazing from them. His small voice carried a command that hit like a physical shockwave. Let them go. The power exploded outward in a wave I could feel in my bones. Everyone in the suite dropped to their knees, including me and Kai. The operatives froze, completely paralyzed by a command from a 5-year-old child. The hotel windows shattered, glass exploding outward from 32 stories up. The pressure was like gravity had increased tenfold. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, could only kneel there and feel the raw alpha power radiating from my baby. Finn and Vanguard Lux Pack forces breached the suite seconds later. They subdued the paralyzed operatives quickly, efficiently. But in the chaos, one escaped. The leader jumped through the broken window, caught by a safety net team below, and disappeared into the Geneva night. Then Asher collapsed. "Baby? Asher." I crawled to him, my ears ringing from the power drain. Kai was there instantly, scooping our unconscious son into his arms. "He's breathing. But we need a hospital. Now." Supernatural-aware EMTs arrived within minutes. They loaded Asher onto a stretcher with careful, worried movements. "Alpha power drain at this age," one of them said, shaking his head. "This is unprecedented. We need to get him stabilized immediately." The ambulance ride to Geneva Supernatural Medical Center was the longest 15 minutes of my life. I held Asher's small hand while Kai sat across from us, both of us silent, both terrified. 18 hours later, Asher was stable but still sleeping. The doctors said his body needed time to recover from the massive power expenditure. They'd never seen a child so young generate that level of command, and they weren't sure what the long-term effects might be. I hadn't left his bedside. Hadn't eaten, barely drank water, just sat there holding his hand and watching the monitors beep with his steady heartbeat. My hair was a mess. My clothes were rumpled. I probably looked like hell, but I didn't care. Kai returned from interrogating the captured operatives. He sat in the chair across from me, and for a long moment, we just existed in silence. "He's going to be okay," Kai said finally. My voice came out hoarse from crying. "They wanted to take him. To experiment on him. On our baby. I know. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. This is your fault." The words spilled out, sharp and cruel. "Your bloodline. Your enemies. If I'd never met you." "You're right," he interrupted. "This is my fault. All of it. You called me a mistake. A liability. You planned to erase me." "No." He leaned forward, his expression intense. "I planned to save you. And I failed. Catastrophically." He pulled out a flash drive, inserted it into my laptop. Watch this. Please. What I saw destroyed everything I'd believed for 5 years. Fabricated photos of me meeting with craftspeople. Falsified financial records showing payments to accounts in my name. And then a recorded conversation that made my blood run cold. Croft's ultimatum. Turn me in for corporate espionage or watch me be executed by the council. The impossible choice Kai had faced, my death or my slow, painful removal from his life to make me irrelevant enough that Croft would lose interest. I thought if I pushed you away, if I made you seem unimportant, Croft would lose interest, Kai said, his voice raw. I thought I was protecting you. Instead, I destroyed us both. You should have told me, I whispered, tears streaming down my face. You should have trusted me. I know. I was arrogant. I thought I could fix everything alone. I thought loving you meant protecting you from hard truths. I was wrong about everything. What about the Sterling transition plan? The emails to that headhunter. Also fake. Created for Nova to find. Brock Slade was loyal to me. He would have been a figurehead. You would have kept control under a different title. I don't believe you. Check the ghost accounts. Check the creation dates. With shaking hands, I accessed the old files I'd stolen 5 years ago. Traced the account origins back to their source. And discovered something that made the world tilt sideways. Kai had created them 7 years ago. The day I was hired. The account names were encoded with letters from my name. I'd always thought it was random, but now I saw the pattern. LS woven through every identifier. I don't understand, I said. Why would you? $847 million wasn't company money, Lila. It was mine. My personal fortune. I stared at him, unable to process what he was saying. Then I found the encrypted memo buried deep in the account documentation. Dated 7 years ago, the day I'd started at Vanguard Lux. Emergency funds for LS. In case I fail her. In case I become my father, a man who sacrificed love for power and died alone. She deserves security I can't promise. If she ever needs to run from me, she should have the means to escape. These accounts are hers, whether she knows it or not. Katie, you gave me escape money? My voice broke. From yourself? My father controlled my mother so completely that she couldn't leave even when she was miserable, Kai said quietly. When she died, he realized he'd loved her to death, literally. His control killed her spirit long before illness killed her body. I swore I'd never do that. So the day I hired you, the day I looked at you and thought, she's going to destroy me, I created an insurance policy. For you. Against me. So I didn't steal from you. No. You took what I'd already given you. The only thing I regret is that you needed to use it. We sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of 5 years of misunderstanding crushing down on both of us. Did you know? Kai asked finally. When you left, did you know about Asher? Yes. And you still didn't tell me. You called me a mistake, I said, fresh tears spilling over. What would you call a child you didn't want? I couldn't risk him feeling like I felt, unwanted, a complication in your perfect life. I missed 5 years, Kai said, and his voice was devastated. His first words, first steps, first laugh. Every milestone. Every moment. Because I was too proud to trust you with the truth, and you were too hurt to trust me with our son. I'm sorry, I sobbed. God, Kai, I'm so sorry. I was trying to protect him, but I see now I was protecting myself. We both made mistakes. Catastrophic, painful mistakes. He reached across the space between us, his hand hovering near mine but not quite touching. But Lila, can we fix them? Can we try? I don't know if I can trust you again. Then let me earn it. However long it takes. Whatever you need. Before I could respond, Asher stirred in his hospital bed. His small voice mumbled something that made both of us freeze. Daddy, Mama, stay. Kai's whisper was barely audible. He called me Daddy. I told him about you after Geneva, I admitted. He deserved to know you existed. Asher's eyes fluttered open. He saw both of us sitting there, on opposite sides of his bed, and a smile crossed his tired face. "You're both here. Good. I like having a mama and a daddy." He fell back asleep immediately, content in a way that broke my heart. Our son wanted both his parents. And we'd been too damaged, too proud, too stupid to give him that. I looked at Kai across our sleeping child. Silent understanding passed between us. Whatever our issues, whatever pain we still needed to work through, Asher needed us united. He needed us to be better than our mistakes. "1 week," I said quietly. "We have 1 week to figure out how to protect him from the Obsidian Collective. After that, we'll deal with us." 1 week, Kai agreed. Neither of us knew that 1 week would change everything. 1 week later, Elena Voss convened an emergency council meeting. Representatives from 12 major PACs filled the chamber, all of them there to discuss the unprecedented situation: a 5-year-old child with alpha power strong enough to shatter windows and a terrorist organization that wanted to kidnap him. I stood beside Kai in front of the council, our united front carefully maintained despite the complicated mess of our personal relationship. Asher was with Finn, safely guarded by Vanguard Lux Pack forces. The Obsidian Collective represents a clear threat to all supernatural children, Elena began. But this particular child's power level raises additional concerns. "The boy is an anomaly," said a voice from the council table. Zane Croft. I recognized him from photos, the rival alpha who'd tried to destroy Kai 5 years ago. His power at age 5 is dangerous. For the greater good, perhaps Obsidian's interest isn't entirely unfounded. Such children should be studied, controlled. "You mean for your revenge?" Kai interrupted coldly. "You orchestrated this entire situation." "That's quite an accusation, Donovan. Care to prove it?" "Actually," I said, stepping forward. "I can." For 2 weeks, while Asher recovered and Kai tried to rebuild what we'd broken, I'd been investigating. Because that's what I did. I followed money, traced financial patterns, uncovered secrets that powerful people tried to hide. I'd used my skills to trace Obsidian's funding. Shell companies, offshore accounts, encrypted transactions that most people wouldn't know how to follow. But I wasn't most people. "May I?" I asked Elena. She nodded, and I connected my laptop to the chamber's projection system. Financial records filled the screens. 10 years of documentation showing Zane Croft systematically funding Obsidian experiments. $47 million transferred through various intermediaries. Pack secrets sold. Locations of powerful bloodlines given to kidnappers. 23 alpha children directly traceable to his information, including 2 from families represented on this very council. The chamber erupted. Council members shouting, demanding answers. Croft's face had gone white. "Zane Croft," Elena said, her voice cutting through the chaos. "You stand accused of treason against the council and all PACs. This means war," Croft snarled. "Obsidian won't stop just because you caught me. They know about the boy. They'll come for him eventually. Then we fight them," Kai said. "Together." "As equals," I added, looking at Elena directly. Kai turned to address the full council. "For centuries, we've maintained bloodline purity above all else. It's made us strong, but also rigid. And it's made brilliant wolves like Lila Sterling, a beta who's more strategically gifted than any alpha here, feel like she's lesser. She's not. And I'm proposing we change the rules." "What exactly are you proposing, Donovan?" Elena asked. "Co-alphas. Equal leadership. Lila Sterling and I, leading Vanguard Lux Pack together. Not as Alpha and Luna. As equals." The council erupted again. Protests, arguments, shocked that an alpha would even suggest such a thing. "This is unprecedented," Elena said. "So is a 5-year-old shattering hotel windows with alpha command," I replied. "We're already past precedent." "I accept," I said, making the decision in that moment. "On one condition." "Anything," Kai said. "Kai Donovan undergoes the same pack trials I do to prove co-leadership. If I have to earn this position, so does he. No special treatment because he's alpha-born." Gasps echoed through the chamber. No alpha had undergone pack trials since childhood. It was humiliating for someone of Kai's status to prove himself again like a teenager seeking pack acceptance. Agreed, Kai said without hesitation. Elena studied us both for a long moment. Very well. The trials begin in 1 month. And if you fail, neither of you will lead Vanguard Lux Pack. We left the council chamber together, partners in this if nothing else. Our son was waiting for us. And for the first time in 5 years, I thought maybe, just maybe, we could build something from the ruins of what we'd destroyed. Act 5, The Resolution. The pack trials took 6 months. 6 months of proving ourselves to a council that had never seen anything like what we were proposing. 6 months of fighting, strategizing, surviving, and slowly rebuilding what we'd destroyed. The first trial was combat. Separate challenges. Each of us had to defeat 3 opponents chosen by the council. Kai fought with the brutal efficiency of an alpha trained from childhood, his victories swift and honorable. I fought smart, using beta agility against alpha strength, turning their power against them until all 3 opponents yielded. We were both victorious, but in completely different ways. That was the point. The second trial tested strategy. The council gave us a failing pack business, a manufacturing company hemorrhaging money and on the verge of bankruptcy. 30 days to save it. I restructured the finances, found the inefficiencies, created a sustainable model. Kai negotiated with creditors and investors, using his reputation and connections to buy us breathing room. Together, combining his risk-taking with my analysis, we didn't just save the business. We turned it profitable. The council was impressed. The third trial was pure endurance. 72 hours in the wilderness with no supplies, no communication, just survival instincts and determination. Asher watched from base camp with Finn, cheering us on. Go mama! Go daddy! His little voice carried across the distance, giving us both strength when exhaustion threatened to break us. We completed the trials separately but crossed the finish line within minutes of each other, exhausted, battered, but triumphant. The fourth trial measured pack loyalty. Anonymous polls asking pack members if they would follow us into danger. The results shocked everyone. 94% for me, 96% for Kai. Higher approval ratings than any alpha in council history. Apparently, respect could be earned through competence and character, not just bloodline. The fifth and final trial was joint leadership. The council gave us an impossible scenario, a pack member trapped in hostile territory, surrounded by enemies, with a 72-hour deadline before execution. We had to save them without violence, without starting a war, without compromising pack security. Kai and I worked through the night, our different perspectives creating a solution neither of us could have found alone. He provided the diplomatic channels and political leverage. I provided the financial pressure and strategic maneuvering. Our plan was so elegant, so effective, that the council adopted it as official policy for future hostage situations. We complemented each other perfectly. That was what they needed to see. The ceremony took place in the council chamber 6 months after we'd started. Representatives from all 12 major packs witnessed as Elena Voss officially recognized us as co-alphas of Vanguard Lux Pack, the first time in supernatural history that equal leadership had been granted to different bloodlines. "You've changed our world," Elena said, her expression unreadable. "Let's hope it survives the revolution you've started." Then came the formal mating ceremony. Pack bonds created between us, supernatural connections that went deeper than marriage, binding us together in ways that couldn't be undone. I felt Kai's presence in my mind for the first time, felt his emotions bleeding into mine: love, regret, hope, determination. Asher sat in the front row, beaming with pride at his parents. He was 6 years old now, growing stronger and more confident every day. After the ceremony, he ran up to us with that boundless energy only children possessed. "You did it. Both of you. Does this mean we're a real family now?" "We've always been a real family," Kai said, scooping him up. Now it's just official. 1 year later, our combined empire was unstoppable. Vanguard Lux and Shin Capital had merged into a financial powerhouse that made us both richer than we'd ever been separately. But more importantly, we'd found balance. Kai and I shared an office, dual desks facing each other, so we could work independently while staying connected. We argued constantly, our different approaches creating the kind of creative tension that produced brilliant results. But we were always united on final decisions, presenting a solid front to the world even when we disagreed in private. Asher was thriving in specialized alpha training, learning to control abilities that had once terrified us. He had friends, confidence, and 2 parents who showed up to every school event together. We'd been business partners, co-alphas, and co-parents for over a year. But we'd never officially married. Too busy. Too focused on building our new life. Too nervous, maybe, about making that final commitment after everything we'd been through. Kai apparently decided it was time to fix that. I discovered his elaborate proposal plans when his secretary accidentally forwarded me the helicopter rental confirmation. Absolutely not, I told him when I confronted him in our office. If you think I'm getting on a helicopter so you can propose on a yacht with fireworks, you've lost your mind. I was trying to be romantic, he protested. You want romantic? I walked around my desk to stand in front of him. I stole your fortune. I hid your son. I ruined your reputation. Marry me anyway. He stared at me for a moment, then started laughing. The sound was warm, genuine, and absolutely perfect. That's the worst proposal I've ever heard. It's honest. So, what do you say? I say you're still the best investment I ever made. He stood up, pulled me close, kissed me until I forgot why we'd ever been apart. Yes. The wedding was small, just Pac and close friends in the garden of our home. Asher took his role as ring bearer very seriously, walking down the aisle with the rings on a pillow like he was carrying something infinitely precious. Finn officiated, and our vows made more than one person cry. I promise to never call you a mistake again, Kai said. I promise to never run again, I replied. I promise to trust you with the truth. I promise to fight for us instead of against you. When it was over, when we'd been declared husband and wife and co-alphas and partners in every way that mattered, we went home as a family. That night, we both tucked Asher into bed together, a routine we'd developed over the past year that still felt miraculous. Did you always love each other? Asher asked, looking between us with those knowing golden eyes. Yes, Kai said. We just forgot for a while, I added. That was silly, Asher declared. Very silly, we both agreed. 6 months after the wedding, we established the Sterling Donovan Initiative, a foundation that funded education for non-alpha wolves, protected children with powerful bloodlines from organizations like Obsidian, and provided financial literacy training for PAC members. We were using our combined wealth and influence to change the systems that had hurt us both. And then came the doctor's appointment that would change everything again. I stared at the ultrasound screen, at the 2 distinct shapes moving and growing. Twins. Both showing alpha markers just like their older brother. Congratulations, the doctor said with a smile. You're going to have your hands full. I called Kai from the parking lot, unable to wait until I got home. Remember how Asher was overwhelming? I said when he answered. Yes. His voice carried a note of suspicion. We're getting 2 more. Silence. Long enough that I checked to make sure the call hadn't dropped. Kai, I'm buying a bigger house. We both laughed, the sound carrying joy and terror in equal measure. 3 children. A blended empire. A partnership forged in betrayal and rebuilt through trust. It was messy and complicated and absolutely perfect. He called me a mistake. So I disappeared with his fortune and his heir. For 5 years, I made him pay for underestimating me. I built an empire from his money. I raised his son without him. I became everything he said I couldn't be. But here's the thing about revenge. It's empty when you're still in love with the person you're destroying. Turns out, the real revenge wasn't taking his money. It wasn't hiding his child. It wasn't even making him spend 5 years searching for me. The real revenge was making him realize what he'd lost, and then making him earn it back. Some love stories start with "I love you." Ours started with "You're a liability." And you know what? I wouldn't change a single mistake. Not the betrayal, not the disappearance, not the 5 years of pain. Because it turned a secretary who was afraid to fight for herself into a woman who brought a billionaire alpha to his knees. They say the best revenge is living well. I say the best revenge is living well and then forgiving the person who underestimated you after they've crawled through broken glass to prove they've changed. Kai learned that love without trust is poison. I learned that trust without communication is impossible. And together, we learned that the strongest partnerships aren't born from perfection. They're forged in the fire of our worst mistakes. So to every woman who's ever been called a mistake, a liability, a complication, you're not. You're extraordinary. And the person who can't see that? They're not worth your time. Unless, of course, they're willing to spend the rest of their life proving they were wrong. Then maybe, just maybe, they're worth a second chance. Thank you for spending the last 90 minutes with us. Our story proves that the strongest bonds aren't unbroken. They're the ones that break, and then are rebuilt stronger than before. I want to hear from you. Would you have taken the money? Would you have told him about the child? Would you have given him a second chance after everything he did? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one, and I love hearing your perspectives. If this story touched your heart, devastated you, or made you believe in second chances, please hit that like button and subscribe to Rubiana Alpha Romance Collection. Your support means everything and helps me keep creating these epic love stories for you. And remember, beautiful listeners, never underestimate the woman you call a mistake. She might just become your destiny. Until next time, this is Rubiana Alpha Romance Collection. Stay passionate, stay fierce, and never settle for being anyone's liability. Before you go, I have 3 questions for you. Team Kai or Team Lila, who do you think was more wrong? If you were Lila, what would you have done with the 847 million? Should I create more stories about characters like this, powerful women who refuse to be victims? Drop your answers below. And if you made it to the end of this 90-minute journey with me, comment "worth it" so I know you were here. See you in the next story, beautiful listeners.